Shocking truth, the 1939 Antarctic Spaceship was an alien. It came from Earth's dark future. Cold winds howled over the icy landscape of Antarctica, where silence reigned until a terrible crash broke through the stillness. A massive, metallic object had been found, its surface scarred and tarnished, telling stories of a fierce battle against relentless elements. This was no ordinary sight. People gathered, jaws dropped, faces pale, as whispered myths twisted into reality. A spaceship, a phrase barely uttered in human history, lay frozen in the desolate white expanse. They came to investigate and left questioning everything they believed. As the frantic search team approached the craft, the air electrified with an otherworldly energy. Frost clung to the ship, glistening like tiny diamonds, reflecting sunlight in chaotic blinks. But the ship was just the beginning. Reports emerged that strange shadows flitted around it at night, darting between the dark and the light, ghostly limbs. Beings? Those who dared to look too closely swore they heard whispers on the wind, echoes of a future filled with threats. The locals saw things out, their eyes blinking in rhythm with their own racing hearts. Things escalated further. A scientist stumbled away from the ship, his hands trembling and eyes wide with terror. "You won't believe what I've seen," he gasped, choking on his words. His team huddled closer, desperate to know. What had he uncovered? They could sense the switch in the air, an oppressive weight pressing down on them, as the scientist's face turned an ashen gray. No one noticed the shifting shadows as they leaned in, curiosity consuming them. Was the ship a relic from a forgotten age or a glimpse into a future they weren't prepared for? Before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The tension hung thick as the scientist finally found his voice. "It's not from space. It's from us. From our future." Gasps erupted, and the crowd fell silent, fear coursing through everyone. What did this mean for them? What kind of future? At that moment, a loud thud echoed from inside the ship, sending shivers down spines and hearts racing. People exchanged frantic glances. A breathless pause thickened the air, only broken by the steady heartbeat of anxiety. What secrets lay trapped within that frozen metal shell? The sun dipped below the horizon, casting eerie long shadows across the crowd, as the first star punctured the cobalt dusk. Will anyone dare to uncover what lurked inside, or are they destined to run from a truth so terrifying it could alter everything? The ground trembled slightly, a distant echo reverberating within the metal womb of the spacecraft. Only a handful had the courage to step forward, the rest stood frozen, hearts pounding in their chests. The air grew frigid, twisting into a palpable fabric of dread that enveloped the gathering. Seconds felt like hours. Suddenly, the ship's door, ancient and frosted over, creaked open. A gust of cold air shot out, tangling with their breaths and seeping into their very souls. Low murmurs rippled through the crowd, uncertainty mixed with morbid curiosity. The scientist's voice was barely a whisper as he dropped his gaze. "We shouldn't." "We can't." A thrill ran through the group as a brave soul took a step on the icy ramp leading inside. Every eye was trained on him, the anticipation sharp enough to cut. With a deep, shuddering breath, he ventured forth, disappearing into the shadows of the craft. The door swung shut behind him with an echoing thud, sealing the crowd's fate. Moments later, a blood-curdling scream burst into the night, shattering the fragile silence. Panic erupted. People stumbled back, hands flying to their mouths. They called out to him, but their words were swallowed by the icy winds. Storm clouds roiled above as fear crept in, poisonous and slow. A group of 4, fueled by adrenaline, decided to follow him, charging up the ramp. Inside, the atmosphere was dense, chilling. Glistening walls, coated in frost, seemed to pulse, alive with a dark energy. Flickers of light darted like fireflies, shifting shadows that danced on metal surfaces. The group felt eyes upon them, watching, waiting. A grotesque sight awaited them at the center, a bizarre console filled with symbols they didn't recognize. "What is this place?" one whispered, kneeling to examine the writings. The giant screen flickered to life, illuminating the dimness. It showed distant landscapes, a ruined city, remnants of skyscrapers twisted and melted. Dark clouds loomed above like a menace, and flares of explosions lit the horizon. "There not, it can't be," another stammered, backing away, arms wrapped around himself in futile protection. A chill swept through the air, and the ship hummed, a deep, vibrating tune that resonated with their bones. "What if we unleashed something?" one of them ventured, voice barely above a whisper, as fear gripped their throats. Suddenly, a beeping noise erupted from the console, piercing the tension. The screen shifted again, revealing a countdown, numbers rapidly diminishing. They scrambled, hearts racing, a primal instinct urging them to flee. "We need to get out," someone yelled as the sound rose to a wailing pitch, engulfing their senses. The door to the spacecraft slammed open, and shadows poured in, swirling like smoke, outlines shifting in the dim light. Outside, the crowd had not remained idle. They shifted nervously, eyes darting from the ship to the darkening sky. The distant mountains felt closer now, as if the very earth was drawing nearer out of fear. The scientist who initially stood paralyzed by terror now seemed to awaken. "They will come for us," he shouted, desperation igniting in his voice. "The future doesn't he want us to know?" The ground jolted once more as the ship rumbled ominously. Beams of light shot from the console towards the night sky, piercing the clouds. The gathering crowd looked on, torn between fright and fascination. The question hung heavy in the atmosphere: what had they uncovered? What would emerge from the bowels of the ship? And as the countdown ticked perilously down, what fate awaited them all? With urgency racing through their veins, the brave few inside readied themselves for the truth. But deeper shadows lingered, spiking apprehension. Dark futures awaited where nightmares and whispers converged. And with that, the ship as final answer bore down upon them like an avalanche. What had been forgotten would soon be resurrected. The console pulsed with an eerie light, illuminating the faces of those inside. Fear twisted their features into masks of horror as they absorbed the rapid countdown. 10, 9, 8. The shadows that flooded the ship's entrance danced menacingly, revealing indistinct forms, whispering and coiling like smoke. They felt the air grow heavier, thickening with dread. Someone screamed again, and it wasn't a human voice, it was a low, guttural growl that rattled their bones. "Move! There's no time." The leader of the group, a wiry man named Aaron, darted toward the console. He raised his hands, fingers trembling as he pressed random symbols, hoping for a miracle. The screen flickered, changing images again to scenes of chaos, a world torn apart, cities consumed by flame. "What is this place?" he shouted, desperation lacing his tone. I think it's a warning." The words came from Sarah, a tech-savvy girl who had remained quiet until now. Her eyes glistened, reflecting the swirling lights. "These images, they look familiar. I think they come from our future." Hayden, another member of the group, cried out. "No way! This has to be some weird trick." But doubt crept into his voice. As the countdown reached 3, the shadows closed in. Wicked laughter echoed through the metallic chambers, sending chills creeping down their spines. Outside, the crowd had drawn closer, their faces a mixed bag of horror and fascination. Some screamed, others stood frozen, captivated by a fear they couldn't shake. "Get us out of here!" Aaron shouted, panic flooding his veins, but the doors slammed shut. A hiss filled the air like a serpent preparing to strike, and the lights flickered violently. "It's locking us in!" The screen flashed a final time, displaying a symbol that made Sarah's blood run cold, a perfect match to a mark she had seen in history books, detailing ancient prophecies about a time when the worlds would collide. "This isn't just a ship. It's a time capsule from our future," she gasped. Outside, the scientist was screaming warnings that were lost in the chaos. We've tampered with forces we can't comprehend. Then, a jarring jolt shook the craft. Everyone stumbled, hearts racing, as the ship responded to the countdown in its own disturbing way. The walls pulsed, the shadows slithered closer, and the countdown reached when the lights flickered out, casting them into an unyielding darkness. The last sound they heard was a loud crack, like thunder combining with the final breath of a dying world. In that moment, time seemed to freeze. Then came the blinding light, more piercing than the sun, illuminating everything, erasing fear as if it had never existed. Shadows receded, laughter faded, and an unholy silence fell deeper than nothingness. Then, just as quickly, they were gone. Outside, the crowd stood still, expressions frozen in disbelief, while the spacecraft trembled and vanished into thin air. The sky crackled, rippling as if the fabric of reality was shaken to its core. What had become of the brave few inside the craft? And what did it mean for those left behind? A heavy shroud of uncertainty cloaked the crowd, leaving them to face a new terror. Was this the beginning of a fight against a future they could no longer ignore? With hearts still racing, whispers of "we shouldn't have gone" lingered in the air, embedded with the question, what had they just unleashed on the world? The world held its breath. The crowd remained glued to the spot, eyes wide, as they searched the sky for any sign of the disappearing craft. But there was nothing. Just a void where the vessel once stood, now an eerie calm. Whispers filled the air, din and argument clashed like waves against the shore. Fear bubbled to the surface as the gravity of what had just happened sank in. "Did you see that?" A voice broke the tension, sharp and accusatory. "They're dead, aren't they?" Someone else lamented. Outside the facility, a distant explosion echoed through the frozen landscape, sending tremors through the crowd. Anxiety twisted into a palpable panic, spreading like wildfire among the audience. People pushed against each other, desperate to escape the gnawing feeling that something catastrophic was about to unfold. Then, from the chaos, emerged the scientist who had rallied them. His disheveled hair was wild, eyes wide and frantic. "Listen!" he shouted, his voice almost drowned out by the growing commotion. "We need to talk about what just happened. They didn't just vanish, they triggered something. A rupture in time." "Rupture?" someone screeched, disbelief threading through their tone. "What do you mean? Did they go back in time? Are we talking about time travel now?" "Yes, but not in the way you think." The scientist's face flushed with urgency as he stumbled to articulate his thoughts. "This isn't fantasy. This ship, it's a vessel of some kind, but it originates from our future. It was trying to escape a world that." He paused, swallowing hard, the weight of the truth nearly too much to bear. "A world that was doomed. A world that may be our own if we don't act fast." His words sliced through the growing panic, planting a seed of dread. A chill swept over the crowd, palpable and raw. "What kind of world?" someone dared to ask, their voice trembling. "A world ruled by darkness. Technology gone wrong and humanity at war." The scientist's hands shook as he gestured wildly, helpless to convey the horror that filled his mind. "If we don't figure out how to reverse this, whatever they unleashed, it will come for us too." His eyes flickered back to the sky, now laden with thick, oppressive clouds that seemed to swell, pulsating, as if something monstrous was stirring just out of sight. Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath them again, more violently this time. People cried out, clutching onto one another as the fabric of reality felt strained. "We need to regroup," someone shouted. "Where do we even start? How do we stop something that has already been set in motion?" Another voice interjected, panic twisting their features. And with that, their focus shifted, a collective realization dawning upon them. What if they were already too late? What if this destiny was already written, each moment leading them closer to an inevitable clash with those monstrous shadows they had seen? As the crowd turned inwards, their fear giving way to a desperate need for answers, far above them, a dark silhouette emerged from the clouds. Not the sleek craft of their friends, but a massive shadow blotted out the foggy sun, like a waking nightmare. "Get back!" the scientist screamed, but it was too late. They were frozen, caught between the past and an uncertain future twisting around them, a future that was hurtling toward them with monstrous intent. The ground shook once more, a deafening roar resounding as the shadow began to descend. What awaited them as this new terror descended? Would they finally confront the nightmare lurking just beyond their grasp? The roar intensified, swallowing whole the desperate cries from the crowd. People instinctively ducked, hearts pounding in sync with the tremors beneath their feet. The shadow loomed larger, darkening the space where hope once flickered. "Run!" someone shouted, but it was lost in the cacophony of terror and confusion. The air thickened with fear, transforming the crowd into a frantic mass of flailing limbs and racing hearts. The scientist grappled with his thoughts. "We need to get inside," he yelled, waving his arms toward the safety of the facility. "Now! We need to gather data. It might be our only chance." A few hesitated, lingering in shock, while others stampeded toward the entrance, pushing and pulling as they rushed to do anything but face the monstrous shadow descending upon them. Suddenly, an electrifying flash lit the sky. It was accompanied by a crack that resonated like thunder. "Is that lightning?" someone gasped, eyes wide, but the shadow was too large. The clouds were impossibly dark. "No!" the scientist shouted, his voice cutting through the din. "It's not natural." It's before he could finish, a blinding light erupted from the descending figure, illuminating the entire area. The crowd shielded their eyes, gasping, as the ground began to shake with renewed fury. People stumbled, some screaming as they fell. In the center of it all, the scientist stood paralyzed, his eyes locked on the source of the light. Time felt suspended, breaths caught in throats, as the terror above finally revealed its true form. A massive craft, more machine than vessel, hovered ominously. Its hull glistened, strangely organic yet foreboding. What should have felt like an alien ship instead screamed of something eerily familiar. "Look!" a voice pointed out from the crowd. "Is that our flag?" The sight jolted the scientist. "No," he murmured, his heart dropping. "It can't be." As the light dimmed, the craft shifted, and he finally recognized the insignia embedded on its side. A symbol woven into the tapestry of deep-seated fears, a brand from a time yet to come, echoing a world-long speculated one built on devastation and despair. Those few that ventured a glance back at the scientist saw his face morph from shock to horror. "We were wrong!" he gasped. "This isn't just a warning. It's a rescue mission or a prelude to war that's already lost. If they've come here, we've failed." The murmurs of disbelief turned frenzied. "Failed at what? What do you mean?" The air crackled with tension as a hatch on the craft began to unfold. A steely figure emerged, clad in a crude, oppressive armor that seemed both ancient and futuristic. The crowd gasped collectively, too terrified to move. "Open your eyes," the figure boomed, voice reverberating across the field. "Time is collapsing. You are all to blame for what comes next." The atmosphere shifted, thickening. His words sunk deep, burrowing into the anxious hearts of those assembled. "Your technology, your choices led us to this nightmare. But we've come to show you the way: either change the course or be consumed by it." As silence enveloped the panic, each person stood gripping onto sanity, a single thought flickering among them. Were their choices truly what had brought this destruction upon them? The hatch began to glow, a portal seemingly opening to an unknown fate. Whether it led to salvation or doom remained uncertain, but one undeniable truth loomed large in their minds: the battle for their future had just begun. "Will you trust us?" the figure asked, extending a hand toward the crowd. And just like that, with the weight of peril hanging in the air, the crowd felt the choice teeter at their fingertips. But who could foresee the price of that choice? What lay beyond that threshold? Would they dare step into the unknown, or would they allow fear to seal their fate? The figure's hand hung in the air, trembling slightly as if anticipating hope or rejection. The crowd wavered, uncertain, and the silence became an oppressive weight that crushed against their chests. Fear loomed over them like the shadow of the vessel, and regret mingled with desperation. What had they truly created? "Don't just stand there!" someone yelled, breaking the thick silence. A call for action as a woman at the front stepped forward, her face pale but resolute. "What do we have to lose?" One by one, Others followed her lead, but doubt lingered in their eyes. What if it's a trick? Another voice shouted from the back, shaking with uncertainty. The scientist's heart raced, realizing all eyes were now on him, waiting for him to provide clarity. But he felt hollow, the enormity of the moment settling in like lead. "Let us hear them out," he finally gasped, attempting to inject courage into the air. "We've done enough on our own to realize we're running out of time. If we don't act now, there won't be a future to save." He thought back to the labs, the equations, the models predicting disaster. It all felt trivial against the dark behemoth hovering above, yet somehow indispensable. At last, the crowd began to move as a collective, stepping toward the silhouetted figure. They were captivated, caught between a desperate desire for salvation and the sordid truth of their history. The armored figure nodded slowly, the light illuminating its features, revealing a face obscured with age and pain. "Your past has brought us here, but the future can still be rewritten." As the hatch widened, a soft hum echoed, a sound unsettling yet inviting. Cool air wafted, mixed with the tantalizing smell of something unfamiliar. People hesitated, pulling back, their instincts screaming at them. "What kind of technology is this?" A man hurled accusations like stones. "How do we know it's not another way to control us?" The figure's voice boomed again, tinged with urgency. "The truth is your people, your lineage, have made devastating choices. You've built this catastrophe one decision at a time. But we can change the trajectory. You must choose now." The crowd shifted, glancing among themselves, the weight of possible futures pressing down. Would they trust this harbinger from the future, or risk facing what they had created? With a suddenness born from desperation, the woman who first stepped forward reached out, her fingers brushing against the glowing threshold. The moment her skin made contact, a tremor coursed through the ground, a ripple of energy that tensed the air. "Stop!" someone screamed, and the world seemed to hold its breath at the sudden rise in chaos around them. But it was too late. The portal sparked, and a brilliant light enveloped her, swallowing her form whole. Gasps cut through the crowd, fear metamorphosed into wild terror. "Did she just?" a young man shouted, stunned, eyes wide as he gripped the arm of his neighbor. But then another figure emerged from behind the first, casting a long shadow across the space. "If she can do it, so can you," the newcomer urged, their voice equally filled with urgency. "It's a leap of faith into an unknown future. Don't leave her to carry this alone." The crowd seemed to ripple like water, fear mingling with determination. With the first volunteer gone, the barrier between decision and indecision shattered, and the thrumming pulse of urgency took hold. Voices began to rise. "I'll go." "Me too." "We can't stay here." The chaotic energy swirled, a whirlwind of uncertainty and hope, inching closer to the luminous hatch. But as the first few rushed forward, the scientist stood frozen, dread wrapping around his heart. What if this path led to more horror? In that defining moment, a terrible sound split the air like a knife, a loud crack, unmistakable and haunting as the craft shuddered ominously. "Choose wisely," the figure's voice echoed as the ground quaked beneath them once more. Time seemed to ripple as chaos spiraled at their feet. With every heartbeat, the countdown began, and the question shadowed their minds like doom. Would they find salvation or seal their fate forever? As men and women rushed toward the light, the scientist felt the unmistakable truth. He was standing on the precipice of a moment that would forever alter humanity's existence. Would he dare take that step, or would he remain trapped in a history he could change? The light flickered, pulsed, and then dimmed, an invitation or an omen? Could the path to redemption begin here, or was this simply the threshold of their doom? The vessel trembled, the sound of metal protesting against the weight of its own history. For a brief moment, the air thickened with confusion. And then, with a jolt, the light flared back to life, brighter and more urgent than before, casting strange shadows over the crowd. The scientist felt an overwhelming tug in his chest, a magnetic pull towards the energy, pulses of fear and excitement mixing in his veins. He glanced around at the sea of faces, each one a mirror of his own internal conflict. Would they really take that leap, or would they falter just inches away from what could be their salvation? Don't leave me behind! A voice cried out from the back of the crowd. It was an older man, eyes wild but resolute, pushing his way through the mass, desperation clawing at his features. A young woman, barely out of her teens, clung to her mother's arm, trembling in terror. Mom, don't! It could be a trap! Her pleas were drowned out by the swelling fervor as more bodies surged toward the radiance. But then, with a ferocity that stunned them all, the ground shook again, but this time it was different. Cracks spiderwebbed across the earth beneath their feet, sending shockwaves of panic rippling through the throng. We don't have much time, the armored figure insisted, voice booming yet laced with fear. The scientist felt his heart race. Each tremor echoed a deeper truth. They were running out of time and options. History looped through his mind an endless cycle of mistakes, ignorance, and consequences. If they wanted to rewrite their fate, they couldn't afford hesitation. Now! He bellowed, louder than he intended, but passion surged through him. If you believe in a tomorrow, step into the light. Don't look back. One by one, people reached out. A young boy followed his father, arms outstretched with reckless hope. An elderly couple clung to each other tightly as they moved forward, love juxtaposed against uncertainty. Yet, behind them, more remained rooted, paralyzed by fear, the staunch belief that comfort, however grim, was better than the unknown. The scientist's breath hitched as he witnessed the first families embrace the light. They vanished into the glowing portal, leaving nothing behind but flickering sparks that sizzled in the night like fireflies. But from his position, he could only feel the weight of indecision. He glanced at the retreating shadows of those who stayed, faces twisted in fear and regret, poisoned by the darkness of their history. With each lost soul, the realization cut deeper. They were destined to repeat their mistakes unless they acted now. I'll go! He surged forward, heart pounding like a drumbeat of his resolve. The figure turned, an unexpected spark of recognition lighting its weary eyes, as if it had seen this reckoning before, etched across the fabric of time. But just as he took his first step, another violent quake rocked the ground. A roar erupted from the heavens, metallic, primal, a sound they had never known before. The sky seemed to warp, colors bending, as if reality itself was splintering under the burden of their collective choices. Another ship? Someone gasped, dread weaving through the crowd. Panic escalated, voices rose, confusion spreading like wildfire. No! It's not what you think! The armored figure shouted, concern etched into its features. This isn't a fight for survival, it's a fight for understanding. In that moment, all eyes turned upward, fear morphing into chaos as the shadows of numerous shapes blotted out the stars, descending with harrowing speed. The scientist felt his stomach drop as he understood the truth was far from simple. It was layered in shadows, buried beneath eons of unspeakable choices. Get inside! He screamed, realizing the urgency of whomever was piloting those ships. If they didn't escape the reckoning of their past, they would be forever marred, trapped in a cycle of destruction. But with the ground quaking beneath their feet and the ominous silhouettes overshadowing them, he realized they were faced with a choice: embrace the unknown future or be consumed by the horrors of the past. As he rushed toward the portal, his heart pounded against his chest, the weight of his decision and fate crashing down like a tidal wave. Would they accept this chance, or would the darkness swallow them whole? A blinding flash lit the night, illuminating everything, a moment suspended in time. And then the first screams broke through the silence, shattering the final barrier of uncertainty. What awaited them on the other side? The truth was emerging, alive and thrumming with energy, and it beckoned with the haunting question: in a world filled with horrors, could they truly redefine their existence? With the light pulsing behind him, the scientist felt the ground shift once more, its tremors gnawing at the edges of his resolve. Screams spiraled through the air, a cacophony of panic and hope. He turned back for just a moment, his heart ached at the sight of those still rooted in fear, swallowed whole by their own shadows. Come on! He shouted, urgency framing each syllable as he stretched out a hand toward the crowd. A collective pulse of doubt rippled through the masses, but he wouldn't let it crush him. This is our chance. We can't afford to hesitate. Yet as he spoke, he realized how delicate their balance was. For every soul that approached the light, another hesitated, shackled by the weight of their memories. The armored figure was still behind him, a sentinel standing guard amidst the chaos. Its voice cut through the tumult with practiced authority. You must choose. Leave the weight of the past behind. Let the light guide you. The scientist felt the desperation creep into his bones. What if the light they chased was merely an illusion, a trick of the mind meant to smother their pain? What if it led them to darker depths? But he had to believe. He couldn't succumb to fear. They were standing at the precipice, on the brink of something unimaginable. The roaring overhead shifted. Something massive passed just above, blotting out the moonlight momentarily. The crowd looked up, jaws slack with a mix of disbelief and dread. What is that? Someone cried out, and fear erupted, spraying like confetti through the air. Suddenly, the sky seemed to crack, a jagged rift splitting it open as a cascade of blinding light poured down, unfurling like ribbons of flame. For just a fleeting moment, the anguish and pulse of their collective heartbeats synchronized, drawn toward the brilliance. But shadows descended from the rift, shapes twisting through the air, a flock of dark figures hurtling towards them with malignant speed. The scientist's stomach twisted into knots. Everyone! Now! We have to move! His voice surged over the disruption, fighting against despair. The first cascade of shadows struck the ground with a deafening crash. Fragments of earth erupted, the air thick with the acrid scent of scorched soil. The armored figure lunged toward the tumult, urgency embodied in its every motion. An electric energy surged through the crowd, firing their instinct to flee. In that moment, the scientist caught sight of the boy from earlier, still shifting between his father and the portal. Don't let fear write your ending, he shouted, glancing into the eyes of those still hesitating. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the will to act despite it. The boy looked up, eyes wide with uncertainty, yet he appeared drawn to the glow behind them, a flicker of instinct breaking through the fog of hesitation. Come on! Cried the father, his arm outstretched, a lifeline amid the chaos. The scientist glanced at the dark figures that loomed, edged in anger and wrath. In their wake, shadows pulsed closer like a thick fog, hungry and relentless. One family plunged forward, grasping hands, leaping toward the light. The scientist felt his breath hitch. Would more follow? Would they turn their backs on fate to embrace uncertainty? More screams echoed as panic reached fever pitch, tears mixed with sweat dripping down faces smeared with fear. From behind, the armored figure called out, "Remember your choices. Remember who you are." As limbs intertwined and souls collided, the scientist felt a surge of hope. Perhaps against all odds, they could transcend. But just as he turned to follow, the onrush of shadows spilled forth, a wave threatening to extinguish the light. He plummeted forward, and for an agonizing heartbeat, everything hung suspended. Who would falter now? Which choice would haunt them forever? And just as it seemed they would be swallowed, a whisper of understanding came, echoing through the chaos. The truth emerged, unfurling like smoke from a fire. The darkness wasn't merely around them, it was entrenched in every decision, every heart, every moment. They declung to the past. Would they bit by bit edge closer to a brighter dawn, or would they pay the ultimate price? In that last flicker of time, he closed his eyes, ready for whatever awaited him, but he never anticipated the revelation lurking just beyond the light, waiting to turn their world upside down. The moment the scientist's feet made contact with the ground again, a powerful shockwave rumbled beneath him. He stumbled forward and opened his eyes, greeted by a scene that took his breath away. They had crossed the barrier, but not into the paradise he had envisioned. Instead, a bleak landscape unfurled around them, twisted and hollow, a menacing echo of the life they once knew. The shadows, now visible, solidified into grotesque forms that skulked through the remnants of their civilization. The figures swirled hungrily, skimming the ground like lost memories. The air was thick with an unnatural chill, a cold that dug deep into bones and stole warmth. It was just darker here, it felt alive with malice. Panic erupted anew as the realization hit. "No!" he shouted, voice cracking. This can't be right. We made a mistake. There was a flicker of light overhead, but it was dimmer, quavering as if it battled against an unseen force. The crowd looked around, confusion painted on their faces. The armored figure was now beside him, urgency replaced by a somber disappointment. We crossed more than a physical boundary, it intoned, the weight of its words hanging heavily in the air. This is a shadow of our future, forged from choices unmade and paths unwalked. The scientist's heart raced. They were not just fleeing an impending doom, they had stepped into it. The implications struck him hard, rattling his thoughts. But how can we change that future? How can we go back? He asked, desperation clawing at his throat. The armored figure glanced toward the mass of shadows moving closer, swirling like a storm about to break. You cannot change what has already been. But you can influence the now, the very moment you are in. Behind them, the crowd was fracturing. Some tried to retreat, dragged by instinctual terror, while others, adrenaline igniting their courage, took hesitant steps forward, drawn to a deeper understanding of what lay ahead. A soft sob broke through the dread, and the scientist turned. It was the boy, tears streaming down his cheeks, agony etched across his young features. I don't want this to be who I become, he whispered, and the scientist felt his heart break for the innocents trapped in a world that felt increasingly malevolent. The shadows coiled tighter, a dangerous haze thickening, ready to wrap them in despair. We can't leave him! The father shouted as he darted towards the boy, his spirit defiant even in the face of overwhelming darkness. Together! The scientist urged, raising his voice above the growing chaos. If we stand united, we have strength. We must hold on to hope. His words hung in the moment like a fragile thread, weaving the disparate souls together. But as he spoke, the ground began to tremble once more, trembling under the weight of something colossal stirring beneath. In a flash, the earth cracked open, and from the depths rose a towering figure cloaked in shadows, its eyes ablaze with a fiery intensity. It was a twisted reflection of the armored being, a dark herald of their worst fears, its roar echoing like a thunderclap through the air. Your past has brought you here, but here you will find your reckoning. It bellowed, and the ground shook violently in response. With each quake, the scientist felt the shadows claw at his thoughts, trying to drag him back into the depths of despair. No! He yelled, grasping for clarity amidst the storm. We will fight through this. But as the towering figure loomed closer, an awful realization struck him. What if this was not just a warning of what they could lose, but also the core of a monstrous truth waiting to unfold? A final, desperate choice loomed before him, and with every fiber of his being, he knew they stood at the cusp of something unimaginable. Would they face the shadows together, or would they crumble under their own terror? The figure plunged forward, the sound of its thunderous approach drowning out all other thoughts, and in that harrowing moment, nothing could prepare them for what would come next. The ground shook violently beneath them, reverberating with a thunderous roar that echoed through the hollow landscape. The towering figure shadowed them, its presence massive and suffocating. The scientists could feel the pulse of panic spread like wildfire among the crowd as they backed away in terror. Fear clutched at their throats, a tight vice squeezing every optimistic thought they harbored. The boy, still trembling near his father, began to sob. I don't want to lose you! The father shouted, reaching out as shadows began to encircle them, twisting and writhing like a living nightmare. In that moment, a realization struck the scientist, a flickering ember of hope amidst the chaos. They weren't just fighting against the shadows, they were fighting for their humanity. Listen! He cried, voice cutting through the panic, a beacon in the storm. We have to stand together. If we unite our strengths, we can harness the light, change the tide of what is to come. Eyes turned toward him, wide with terror but also glinting with a hint of determination. But how? Someone called back, doubt falling heavily over their words. By embracing our choices, he replied. We can forge a new path. This darkness isn't just the past we're escaping, it's a trial to face. His heart thudded fiercely in his chest, each beat reminding him that defeat was not an option. If we stand as one, we can create the future we want together. The armored figure next to him nodded slowly, filling the air with strength. You carry the spark of change, the will to resist the darkness. But only by facing it collectively can you reshape your fate. With those rallying words, courage blossomed in their hearts, a defiant bloom against the encroaching despair. The scientist felt it swell within the crowd, a tide of hope that pushed them toward the towering shadow drawing nearer, its anger palpable. Together, he called, as voices began to echo his sentiment. One step at a time. He reached out, beckoning them forward. The massive figure loomed over them, but as they moved closer, they felt their fears start to dissipate. "Let us do this," the father shouted, holding his son's hand tightly as more families joined him. They stepped forward, a united front against the monstrous dark that threatened to consume them. The figures in the shadows writhed, feeding on the doubts and fears of those lost within them. "This is a futile fight," the monstrous figure roared, its voice echoing like thunder rolling against the stormy sky. "You cannot escape what you have made." "And we won't," the scientist shouted back, emboldened. "We will confront it. We'll redefine who we are." A surge of energy pulsed through the crowd, igniting their spirits. Each person felt the flicker of resistance, their presence igniting new courage in the hearts of others. They began to shout, fueled by the bond they were creating. "No more fear! No more shadows!" As they moved in unison, the ground began to tremble less, the dark figure's fire dimming against the overwhelming light of their solidarity. The scientists felt a shift in the air, a promise that they were reshaping their destiny right before their eyes. The towering shadow roared in frustration, its form flickering as if struggling against an unseen force. It lunged forward, but now, there was a barrier built from the collective strength of all those present. Determination radiated from their hearts, pushing back against the darkness as they embraced the light. "Push forward. Don't stop," the scientist urged, feeling the energy swell and swell until it erupted like a supernova in the night sky. Suddenly, a blinding light enveloped them all, casting the shadow back. It shrieked, battling against the brightness, but it was no use. The warmth surged through everyone, pushing the darkness away. "What is happening?" someone gasped, eyes wide, as the world shifted around them, transforming into a kaleidoscope of colors, the future twisting and reshaping with each heartbeat of hope. "We are rewriting it!" the scientist yelled, feeling the energy surround him like a cocoon. "This is our chance." Just as quickly, the dark figure began to dissolve before their eyes, collapsing into wisps of smoke that swirled into the ether. The landscape around them shimmered as colors ignited the bleakness into vivid life. The world was awakening anew, and with it came the promise of a future reclaimed. As the blinding light faded, they found themselves standing in a beautiful new realm, an innovative garden filled with lush greenery and vibrant flora sprawling across the horizon. It was alive, full of possibilities, free from the chains of their past mistakes. The crowd stood in awe, their faces glowing with wonder. Could they truly have changed their fate? The fears and regrets that once clung to their souls were replaced with the bright tinge of hope. The armored figure stepped forward, a soft smile playing at the corners of its lips. "You have chosen to face your truth, and with that, created a future built on resilience and unity." Tears of relief mixed with joy flowed freely in the crowd. They had recognized their power, they had shaped their destiny together, against all odds. Embracing one another, they knew they had forged a bond that could not be broken, and in that moment, they understood, the shadows of their past no longer ruled them. They had faced darkness, embraced light, and now held a future brighter than they ever dared to imagine. As they looked onward, full of anticipation, the scientist smiled, a feeling of gratitude washing over him. With one final glance at the path they had traveled, they stepped forward, hand in hand, into their new world of infinite possibility. Now, lost in the resounding joy of their shared triumph, a call to arms echoed in the air. The crowd knew they had carved out a new legacy, not only for themselves but for generations yet to come. With a heart full of hope, the scientist knew this was just the beginning. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash the like button now to feed the algorithm. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about the ending. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to show your support because only true fans understand the importance of taking action now.